I read some of your essays. I haven't scored them, but read them. I studied your physical body language, facial language, when you were here on Tuesday and Thursday. You looked interested. You looked excited. You looked inspired. But now it was time for you to write an essay. Inspiration doesn't help, because now you're dealing with the limitation of your knowledge. Now you're dealing with sloth, i.e. laziness. Now you're dealing with the confusion that's created by emotions. You're dealing with limited vocabulary. And then I read your essay and I say, the hell is this? Yes, you were inspired. Yes, you were interested. But it's simply not enough. Now, remember, Gilgamesh is a man who knows that he is old, but he wants to become young. He has this desire. He has this need to become young. But the desire and the need by themselves are not enough. Now, here's the thing that you need to know. If you really, really, really want to be relatively wise, insightful about things, your will by itself is not enough. So the gods look down, they realize this is Gilgamesh, chosen of the gods. He has 2/3 divinity inside him, 1/3 being a human, and the human beats down divinity all the time. People begin to complain to the gods. And the gods say, we need to remind Gilgamesh what it means to be human. Gilgamesh lives in a city. It's called Uruk, present-day Iraq. What is it that city life gives us? Walk around Oakland. What do you find? You find people, some are ugly, some are attractive. Unattractive people inspire negative emotions. You feel bad for them. You don't want to be around them. Maybe you pity them. You feel sorry for them. You'll find some folks who are attractive. You want to be around them. They inspire positive feelings. You see trash. You see things that are relatively harmonious. You see loud noise. You hear sounds that are calming. You see trash. I got an email from the president. It was a mass email. They found someone dead in their car, not too far from the campus. This is the second time now. One was found on campus, dead. The other just by the parking lot. Drugs, alcohol, porn, poverty, homelessness. You look at the buses, advertisement. You have all sorts of addictions. That is what a city life looks like. There is nothing human about us. The city lives inside all of us, and yet we have this yearning, this longing. We want to resurrect, bring to life the intuition or the divinity that lives within. Okay. Now, if the gods above like you, they will bring into your life someone who can teach you. The goddess Ninsun goes to the gods and says, I have a son whose heart knows no rest. Why is that? Consider yourself for a moment. The number of boyfriends or girlfriends you've had, the number of friends you've had, the many books you have read, the many places you have visited. There is no contentment. We're always chasing after something to feel an ounce of aliveness. The gods gather together and they say, Gilgamesh has forgotten who he is. We need to remind him. An important point here is that none of us in this class really are human beings. We have the shell that looks like human. But we have what the Christians would call the 7 deadly sins that live inside us. We are lazy, intellectually lazy, physically lazy, emotionally lazy. We are filled with greed, envy, anger, fear. That's what city life does to you. Some of you wrote this essay because, well, you fear your grade. Without the grade, you can't graduate. You can't get a job. You can't transfer. Okay? The gods begin to sit together and begin to cry. Their tears drop on dirt. Now you have mud. They shape the mud into a human being. They name him Enkidu. And they throw Enkidu into the forest, not too far from where Gilgamesh lives. Whenever you read epics, forest or nature always is symbolic for innocence, purity, not being contaminated by human civilization. Enkidu walks around naked. Enkidu speaks with the animals, run with the animals. Enkidu is one with nature. I suppose he's a vegan. Why is Enkidu created? Not so that Enkidu can his own life the way he wants to. His function is to walk eventually into Gilgamesh's life and remind him what it means to be human. When you live in the city, we are conditioned to have certain kinds of fears inside us: shame, guilt, remorse. These are the emotional clothing that we wear on a daily basis. And it's through these clothings that we begin to express and communicate with other people. Enkidu, on the other hand, does not need to wear anything. He's pure and he's innocent. Animals don't run away from him. But how do you bring someone who is innocent into the life of someone who is corrupt? What needs to happen? You know, because Gilgamesh is created by the gods to some extent, is very, very handsome. And because he has power, he can push people around and never examine his own position in life. That's one of the things you need to understand. With any amount of power, there's a good amount of forgetfulness. You get drunk by the power that's given to you. In the city of Uruk, there is a man who hunts animals. He goes to the forest, lays these traps, animals get caught. He brings the animals to the city and he sells them. When you live in the city, every single one of your intentions is very calculated. You're business minded. You play life in the city very much like the way you play chess. You want to win. For those of you who are really, really interested in the ideas that we talk about in this class, do not write the essays. Come to class, be inspired, excited, if that's how you feel about the class. And whenever you sit down to write the essay for the grade, say, no, I rather fail the class. I rather just follow my intuition. I want to move with excitement and inspiration. I don't want to write for a grade. I want to write because emotions and thoughts are oozing out of me. I'm not going to follow a certain format. I'm not going to answer the questions. I'm going to be like the salmon fish and see how far that'll take you. Are you willing to risk your future for the voices that come from your intuition? And I'm only talking about a pathetic little grade. You're talking about Gilgamesh, who's a prince, lots of power. He controls the lives of his people. When guys get married, the first person who has intimacy with a woman is Gilgamesh, not the husband. Just imagine how that would make the man feel that his new wife is sleeping with someone other than him. And yet, because Gilgamesh is a prince and people know that he has divinity inside him, they say, okay, they have no choice. How does one tame someone like Donald Trump? How does one tame anyone who has a good amount of power? So one day this hunter goes to the forest, looks at the traps, finds no animals. He's wondering why. As he's coming out of the forest to enter the city, he hears the sound. He looks behind him and there is this beast of a human being, all naked, and every time an animal falls into the trap, he rescues them. Enkidu spends his life making sure no living entity lives in pain. A city life makes us callous. It thickens your skin. You may feel bad for the first homeless person that you pass, give him $1 or $2. The second one, 50 cents. The third one, maybe a dime. The fourth one. Why doesn't the city do something about this? They just cross the street so you don't have to look at them. That's what city life does to us. So this hunter goes to his father and says, there is this beast in the forest. Our business is suffering. What can I do to continue prospering, hunting animals? And the father says something really interesting. Go to the temple. Ask for a prostitute whose name is Shamat. Let Shamat walk to Enkidu. That's all you need to do. Let me say a couple of things about prostitution, about women, about sex. There was a book that was written in the Middle East. It's called The Arabian Nights. In one of the chapters, there's a story called 1001 Nights. So this is the story. You have a king, very handsome, very powerful, very bored. And the easiest thing that will bring him to life, attractive women in sex. Every night, before he retires to the bedroom, he calls some of his servants and he says to them, go fetch me a young, attractive woman. And they say yes. 10 minutes later, a woman knocks on his door and the king says, come in. They disrobe. They have sex. The king in the morning looks at another set of servants and says to them, this woman is no longer of any use to me. Execute her. Okay. Two things. When you have power, any kind of power, boredom awaits you. If biologically, physically, you're very attractive, when you go to parties, people will come to you. After a while, you realize what was once exciting now feels like harassment. Either we want to be left alone. If at one point you were inspired by a certain set of emotions, now they tire you out. The point ultimately is that whenever you have power in anything, you have no choice but to cause yourself boredom. What power does, it allows you to become saturated. And once you're saturated, the things that used to be exciting no longer are. Joaquin is looking around, seeing if anybody's awake. Night after night, he has sex with various women, and those poor women get executed. Then comes in this woman whose name is Shahrazad. It's a Persian name, two Persian words. Shahr means a city. Zad means to be born. It is not an accident that the name of this woman is Shahrazad. That anyone who has depth and substance inside them will create a space inside you. That space looks like a city. It has its own set of advertisements, but they don't have Snoop Dogg in it. They have people like Malcolm X in it, Mahatma Gandhi in it. Okay? Now, Shahrazad walks into this room and the king says, disrobe. And she says, no. For the first time, you have a woman who opposes the wishes of the king. And the king says, don't you know I have power over you? This robe. And she says, under one condition. What is it? Let me tell you a story. You have a king who's addicted to someone's physical body, i.e. sex, because it is the quickest way to come to life. You can come to life by reading a book. You just have to read a lot of pages, and you have to be in the right mood, and it has to be the right book. You can watch a good movie, but it takes time for the pressure to be created inside you so you can feel the character of Al Pacino. The point is, almost everything takes a long, long time to create inspiration within us. But go to a party, look at someone who is physically attractive, and in an instant you have inspiration. And that inspiration will move your physical body towards the person. You have to feel bad for the king. Because life, despite it's having all sorts of different things to create excitement and inspiration, the only thing remaining for the king is sex. And this woman named Shahrazad, she knows what the king is suffering from. So she looks at the king and says, you can have sex with me, but first I need to tell you a story. This woman is profoundly attractive. The king does not want to lose the opportunity of intimacy with this woman. So he says, yes. She begins the story. An hour passes, 2, 3, 4. The story doesn't end. The woman looks at the king, and the king is really excited, inspired by the story. He's glued to his seat. And she looks at the king and says, I'm really, really tired. Can I just rest and tell you the rest of the story tomorrow? The king had forgotten all about this woman's body. He had become interested in the story. For those of you in this class who have a companion, and once in a while you have intimacy with your companion, create an environment when you go home tonight.
My bad. I'm going to turn my phone on. Right?
Inspire your companion. Do not inspire him, and it has to be a he. Do not inspire him to enjoy your body. Inspire him to enjoy the way you think and feel about things. Share some depth that lives inside you with this companion of yours. And if you're creative enough and you have depth and substance within you, you will be successful. If you're superficial and have no depth, forget it. This exercise is not meant for you. Once you have inspired your companion and he's no longer interested in your body, there will come a point where he is so mesmerized, so awestruck by the way you think and feel about things, by the way you have depth and substance within you, he will take you into the bedroom. He will desire to make love. Not sex, love. But pay close attention to what happens. And this is a story I borrow from my friend Jean-Paul Sartre, the existential philosopher. He looks at you and says, I love the way you think, and I love the way you feel. There is so much inspiration, creativity, like the salmon fish, profound intuition. You bring God alive inside me, he says to you. Then you go to the bedroom. Then he undresses you. And then you realize, little by little, he's interested in your physical body. Pay close attention to the way his hands move. to the way he touches you. And you realize that the inspiration is no longer about him being attracted to your mind or to your soul or to your spirit. It's all about your flesh. And then look at him and say, what are you doing? Just a few minutes ago, you were talking about my intuition, my spirit, my soul, my creativity, and now all you're interested in my flesh. Stop behaving like an animal. And no doubt he'll look at you and say, why do you have to ruin such great moments? For the ancient people, prostitution was an art. Sex was an art. It was a way for women to bring men to life. In a way that would transcend their senses. So Shahrazad tells this king the story. And then she falls asleep. The king keeps thinking, imagining the story. At a certain point, he gets exhausted. And then he goes back to what he always does. He thinks about sex. The next day comes. He looks at her and says, sex? She says, no, my king, let me finish the story for you. He remembers. To be human is to forget. So she continues with the story, another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours. And again, he forgets all about sex and her body, about pleasures of the flesh. He basks in the pleasures of the mind and the soul. That's how inspired he is by this woman and the way she's telling the story. Again, after 5 hours, she looks at the king and says, I'm sorry, far too exhausted. Can I just take a nap on the sofa? I'll promise I finish the story in the morning or tomorrow night. And the king once again says yes. And the same thing happens over and over and over again for 1,001 nights. A king who used to have sex every single night is tamed for 1,001 nights. 0 sex. His body did not grind next to another body. Do you know how difficult that is? And when the story ends, he doesn't just have intimacy or sex with her body. He has fallen in love. They get married. They have children. How do you tame power? How do you remind someone that they are more than just simply flesh? Temple prostitution. Ancient people the mothers used to take their daughters, 7, 8, 9, 10, to a temple where prostitutes only lived. The person in charge would open the door and the woman would say, do you think she has the capacity and the talent? Do you see a soul inside her that can be trained so that it could come to baptize men? And so this woman would look deep into this kid's eyes and find the soul perhaps, or maybe not. If she was able to detect any soul, she would say, yes, we'll take your child in. And then that child would be trained to understand human biology, human psychology. And the task would be profoundly arduous, difficult. And then these prostitutes would go around looking for men who are in the right place in life to become awakened. So for those of you in this class who have some depth to you, you have substance, you think, you reflect, you feel deeply about things. If you want someone to walk into your life and stay in your life, make sure you glue them to their seat for 1,001 nights. Should you find them committed, if you want to be intimate with them, then do so then. Should you do intimacy before that, they will eventually lose interest and walk away. So Shamat, this temple prostitute, walks to Enkidu. Enkidu is talking to a deer or a goat or a cow, completely oblivious to the surrounding. And he hears the sound, this noise. He turns around and there is this woman. He has never seen a woman. He doesn't know what to do with this creature. But she is attractive. Her task is to tame Enkidu, to civilize him, so that she could walk him to the city Uruk, so that he could meet Gilgamesh, so that he could tame Gilgamesh. So one of the things you need to understand then is the following. If you have heavyweight questions that live inside you, but you live in the city and you are corrupted by the city life, you need someone who is innocent to be willing to walk into your life. Without that, there is no hope. So all spiritual quests need two things: a student who's ready and a teacher who is willing. It's not enough to simply ask questions to be a student and have no teacher. You won't get very far. Now, do you have any questions before I continue?
It was about the book.
I'm sorry?
It was about the book.
Yeah.
I remember that she volunteered to go to the king, but I don't remember the part where she knew the condition of the king.
One of the things that you should understand about my storytelling, I make a lot of things up.
All right, I was just.
Yeah. So just in case you buy the book and realize that there is no such story in the book, don't be surprised. Have you ever seen the movie V for Vendetta? You need to see the movie. Good artists create good lies to express profound truths. Watch the movie, it's good for you. Now, Enkidu doesn't know what to do with this woman. The woman has disrobed, she is naked, and she looks beautiful. Now, let me tell you a couple of things about, I suppose, what it means to be a woman. Not that I am one, just one set of stories that have come down from various traditions. Hindu tradition. God creates man. One day man goes to God and says, I'm alone. It's not fun to be alone. God looks at man and says, go away, come back in a couple of weeks. Man comes back in a couple of weeks. He knocks on the door, the gates open. Man looks at God and says, have you thought about a way for me to no longer be alone? God points to his right. Man looks to his right, sees something he's never seen before. A woman. Long, brown hair, big, brown eyes, soft, silky brown skin. And man looks at God and says, what am I to do with this? Hold her hand, go home, be happy. But before I do that, how did you create such an entity? And God looks at man and says, from the heat of the sun and the softness of the moon, the curviness of the branches, the faithfulness of a horse, the cunningness of a fox, and so on and so forth. The man is excited. Hand in hand, they go home. And he is happy. 2 weeks later, he goes back to God and says, what have you done to me? She talks all the time. She sticks to me like a glue. She suffocates me. She's jealous. She's envious. She's greedy. From dusk to dawn, all I do is try to please her. Please, take her away from me. God says, fine. Man goes home alone, comes back, goes back to God again in a couple of weeks and says, I miss her so terribly. The way she makes me feel. I see the stars in her eyes. She embodies both divine and demonic qualities. Can I have her back? God says, sure. Man goes back home. 2 weeks later, goes back to God. But this time, he just shakes his head. What am I to do, he says. And God looks at man and says, in women, I have hidden the entire secrets of existence. Know a woman, and you will know God. It's a great story, isn't it? In the Islamic tradition, Adam is walking in the garden, and all of a sudden he sees this creature he's never seen before. Long, brown hair, big, brown eyes, nice, silky, shiny, brown skin. He says, man, I've never seen such a thing. It's beautiful. What am I to do with her? He looks into the animal kingdom. The lion is on top of the lioness. All male animals are on top of female animals. And man says, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. Okay. So he jumps on the woman. And the woman pushes him off of her, slaps her, and says to him, I am the servant of God. If you want to be with me, you have to ask God's permission. Adam is a little perplexed. God's permission? I just want to be on top of you. It feels so good. I'm a servant of God. Ask God's permission. How? Call to the angel Gabriel. So the man calls Adam. The angel comes down, says, I want to be with this woman. How? Can I be with this woman? And Gabriel looks at this man and says, before you can be with this woman, give 20 prayers of thankfulness to God. And make sure that as long as you're with her, her desires are always fulfilled. Jewish tradition. A mayor of a certain city runs into a rabbi who has a daughter and says to the rabbi, "Your God, Yahweh, is a thief. He's most corrupt and cruel." The rabbi asks, "Why?" "He put man to sleep, stole a rib, and turned into a woman without man's permission." And before the rabbi has a chance to respond, his daughter gets in and says, "Dad, let me respond to the mayor's comments." The girl looks at the mayor and says, "Call the police." "Why?" the mayor asks. "Last night, we had a thief who broke into our house. He took all of our silver plates and replaced all the silver plates with gold." And the mayor is puzzled. "Someone took silver and replaced them with gold? You're richer now." And the girl looks at the mayor and says, "That's exactly what God did. He took a rib, silver, and gave man gold." And what you have in all these different narratives is a certain way that people used to look at women, a certain way that women used to look at women. So for those of you in this class whose heroes are people like Rihanna and Miley Cyrus and Beyonce and the rest of them, it's not a bad idea to kind of read some of the literatures about ancient people and how they viewed women. But let me top the story with a very, very old story that comes from a certain part of Africa called the Albatross community. A man goes out early morning, and then upon his return, he calls his wife and he says, "I'm home." And the woman knows exactly what she needs to do. She comes out with a bucket of water. She washes his feet. Then she washes his hands. Then she washes his face. Then they go into the kitchen and he says, "Where's my food?" The woman brings him some food. He sits at the table. The woman sits on the ground. He eats first. She has to wait until he is done. Once he is done, he looks at his wife and he says, "You can eat now." When I was much younger as an instructor, I would let students kind of go at the story, and most people would find the story offensive, that there is something wrong with these people. Why would they ask women to do such things? But since I'm no longer young, I no longer have patience for some of the nonsense that students would say, let me just tell you what the story means. As a man, you go out into the world and you get contaminated. You become ambitious, you become greedy, you become lustful. The truth is, you don't want to take all those emotions, all those thoughts inside your home. A home is supposed to be your Sabbath. It's supposed to be your resting place. It's supposed to be a place of innocence and purity. It's a community. And you don't want to contaminate it with the city stuff. So the woman comes out and she does something very interesting. Whenever you desire anything that the city offers you, your feet takes you to the object of desire. Your hands stretch out and touch the object of desire. Your eyes initiate this entire journey towards obtaining the object of desire. Your entire soul is contaminated by desires that create a negative home life. The woman comes out with a bucket of water. She washes, she baptizes your feet. Then she baptizes your hands. Then she baptizes your face. What you hear, what you smell, what you speak, and what you see in the city, they can't go home. You sit at the table and she sits on the floor because a man is not worthy to sit on earth. He eats first, just in case the food is bad. He should get sick, possibly potentially die. The woman is far too sacred. The point of all these stories really is simple and yet very complicated. And I suppose if I was to give a very, very short reason as to why I tell you these stories about the way women used to be viewed, I'm going to go to my good friend Karl Marx. In Capitalism, he once argued, all women are transformed into prostitutes. And I suppose one could go even further and say all human beings in capitalism eventually are turned into prostitutes. Now, Enkidu and Shamat get together. Enkidu falls asleep in the arms of Shamat, wakes up in the morning and feels a little weird. He walks to the animals, but the animals run away from him. He can no longer keep up with the animals. He feels alienated. He feels as if he's been expelled from the Garden of Eden.